Welcome back to another episode of the Links Golf Podcast. We presented this season by FootJoy, and our conversation today is perfect for anyone who wears FootJoys or golf shoes of any kind because we're talking about our favorite walks from our Links 100 list of the world's best courses. Again, you can go to linksmagazine.com. Up on the top menu bar, you'll see the Links 100. Click that and you can see the full list of courses there as voted on by golf architects exclusively. Linksmagazine.com to learn more. We are taking a few courses each from that list and describing our favorite walks on among the world's best. So, Joe, I know you did a piece not too long ago about, in general, golf's greatest walks. That included a course or two, I think, from this list. But what does that mean to you? What constitutes a great walk in golf?
Yeah, Al, I really believe that the most enjoyable form of golf is when you're walking. And in many cases, slash most cases, that option is available. Not always. There are certainly plenty of high-end resorts and so forth. Real estate oriented golf courses pretty much demand golf carts, and even mandatory. That's okay. I don't begrudge the riding experience either, because it's still playing golf. But when you get to walk a great golf course, there is nothing more special than that. Whether it's with a caddy or you threw the bag over your shoulder or you got your push cart or electric trolley, I mean, golf's greatest walks to me should stretch the legs. Okay. Ideally, there should be a little bit of hill climbing. They should stimulate the senses, test your physical skills, yet envelop you in serenity. Striding seaside is singular in its pleasures, and we'll get to a couple of those great seaside tests. But a tranquil inland walk in the woods can be equally compelling. So, without further ado, let's get to our favorite walks of the Links 100.
Well said, well put. We took all of those things into account, I think, picking these choices. And for me, and I think for you, Joe, we took a look and traded what our choices were going to be. And the way we approached this was saying, for me, if I had to pick the greatest walks I've ever done, Pebble Beach and Augusta National would easily be atop that list. And we could just talk about that as we have over and over again in articles on podcasts. And, we've covered Pebble and Augusta, I think. And those are obvious picks for me. Were there others for you that were just like, yeah, everyone's pretty much in agreement that these are great walks? We're going to talk about others.
Yeah, no question, Al. The two that I figure everybody would understand, basically, that are just perfect walks are Wingfoot West, multiple majors on this really perfectly gently rolling terrain. And the challenge comes from the propped up greens with the super deep bunkers. But sorry about that, but it's such an enjoyable walk. And then the other one in springtime, is there a better, more enjoyable walk than Pinehurst number 2? As Tommy Armour once said, the great Silver Scott in the 20s and 30s, having the fragrance of the pine trees and walking around Pinehurst number 2. If you don't love that, you should be barred from golf for life. And in particular, spring, as the azaleas are popping, the magnolias are coming in, and walking on that sandy soil in the sandhills is a joy. So, kind of start off there with Pebble, Augusta, Wingfoot, and Pinehurst number 2, among our favorites in the Links 100. And then, okay, branch out to a few more truly individualistic choices for what you and I decided to do today.
Totally agree with both of those as well. Pinehurst, pretty easy walk. Same with Wingfoot. Hard to argue that it's not a great walk. anytime you get to either of those places. So again, check out the list on our website, the links 100, 1 through 100. Tell us about how many you've played, what you constitute as your best walks. Feel free to comment and talk to us on social media, on our YouTube page, all over the place. Anyways, let's get to it. Um, Joe, I want to start with you because we're going to start at the top.
Okay, I realize this should have been uh, okay. Call me Captain Obvious, Al, but I have to start with Cypress Point. It's the number one course ranked in the Links 100 by the architects of the three leading societies of the world, narrowly edged Pine Valley, and yet it is so unforgettable whether you've walked it once or, man, I guess I've played Cypress 5 times, maybe 6, whatever the number. You don't forget the first time. It was so memorable to me that for years afterwards, years, when I was having trouble falling asleep, I would replay my round at Cypress, starting at the first hole. And, it's great because people around me are able to get to sleep when I tell them about my first round, going shot for shot and hole for hole. But for me, it was just that special. And it remains that special all these years later. The obvious, the most magnificent combination of terrain. Uh, the guy who built it, Sam Morse, uh, talked about it in an article. I quoted him that we did a few years ago in the magazine. He said it was built in the most unique and beautiful setting imaginable. There are 3 holes that play across the arm of the sea. There are others that are backed by magnificent vistas of forest and mountain bordered by Monterey pine and the weird cypress which abounds there. There are giant sand dunes which one plays over, along, and sometimes, unfortunately, into. It is a combination of brilliant green fairways, startlingly blue water, unbelievably white sand, with a superb achievement in golf architecture. Okay, if he sounds like a PR guy, yeah, he built the place and he was, trying to sell memberships, but he's absolutely right. And you get that setting with all of those colors and textures, plus seagulls and sea lions and deer and hawks. And then obviously the architecture itself, as you walk through the golf course into these different environments, each like a symphony possessing outstanding mood, rhythm, balance. Cypress hits every note. And you finish the 14th hole, and then maybe the best walk in all of golf. You kind of wind through a forest, and when you emerge, you are out on the ocean again with the tiny 15th hole, one of the most spectacular par threes, and then 16 to follow. So you're in near isolation, wind, waves, trees, bunkers, and then those ocean carries. That's what does it for me at Cypress Point, and why it's my favorite walk in golf.
Played it 5 or 6 times. I mean, same sum for the rest of us, Joe. Come on. I've I know you can do the drive, the 17-mile drive, and I've done it where you get pretty much right there at the first tee of Cypress. I can kind of peer in as an outsider. You dare not cross the line to try and get out there, but uh, as you're going along, you can just barely think that you're going to see those last ocean holes through the trees in the drive, and then at the very last minute, the drive turns left and away from that beauty that eludes so many that have wanted to play this course as one of the best in the world. I just can't imagine until it actually happens what that walk is really like.
Well, it will happen hopefully sooner than later for you, Al. But in the meantime, do what I do whenever you visit the 17-mile drive. Bring a periscope with you. And that way you can just pop it up in the late afternoon, not too many folks around. And there you go, looking at some of those holes that you dream about playing.
There you go. get a peek. So yeah, Joe, and is that Cypress over your shoulder there in the background?
Actually, Al, it is. Yes, a, birthday present from the missus a few years ago. Get 16th green in there and 17 in the backdrop. Yeah, it's a special place. Uh, that's the only thing on that wall.
Staying power, that's for sure. I used to do that same thing, um, sort of same thing, exercise to fall asleep. And instead of playing a single round over and over in my head that I had played, I would play the course I grew up on in my head and just kind of think about, where's the best place to be off the tee and go hole by hole and what would be like the perfect shot and make up the pin positions in my head. And that's sort of how I would try to fall asleep. I, Maybe other people do that too.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I might have been the first to, in my own mind, way back then, but I thought it was a pretty effective way of getting the job done. And usually by the second or third hole, I'd conked out, but once in a while, it was fun to get to the ocean.
All right. Well, I'll go for my first pick then of our favorite walks on the Lynx 100 outside the obvious choices. So number 37 at our list. You started at number one. I went down to 37, and I think this was a surprise to a lot of people that it was this high on the world's top 100 courses, Joe. Yeamans Hall in Hanahan, South Carolina, outside of Charleston. I think that caught some people by surprise how high it was in the rankings, don't you?
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every top 100 list has its share of surprises, whether omissions or placement within the top 100. And Yeamans Hall, as we're going to talk about, what a marvelous walk it is, definitely quite surprising to be that high.
It's worthy of being in a list like this. And then obviously, the architects value this course highly, and that's why you see it ranked where it is. It's Seth Rayner, 1925. So, Joe, this was the first Seth Rayner course that I had the pleasure of playing early in my tenure with Lynx. George Pepper invited me out to play at Yeamans. As anyone who's been there does, I got to the gate and then felt transported almost back in time, uh, almost like you're in a Lifetime movie about the South in the 1920s or something. I mean, it's like 1920s, I guess, would be apropos because it was founded in 1925. But you feel like you're on the set of a movie, just rolling in your carriage instead of your four-door sedan. But uh, you kind of just take a look around, and everything's very low key. It's in the low country of South Carolina, Spanish moss on the water. It's understated in ways that being overstated would just feel like a farce. Would feel like trying to do too much. This is just a classic golf club in the South that doesn't need to be too much to be that unique and special and have that charm. Um, so being the first Seth Rayner I ever saw, it was pretty eye opening to me, as you can imagine. Uh, some of the course features, the greens, chocolate drops mixed in there, getting to the Redan hole and the Biarritz, and just sort of being amused and bewildered by what I was experiencing, because I hadn't quite seen a golf course like that before. The clubhouse pretty nonchalant. I think there's 35 cottages on site, so the housing is minimal, member-owned things that don't really intrude on the golf at all. The clubhouse is, or the locker room is detached from the clubhouse, uh, and I thought that was kind of interesting, and that never seen that before. Almost like the shoe changing room was, just kind of go over there to take care of that business, and then the clubhouse was just for refreshments and lunch and enjoying the beauty. But uh, celebrating 100 years as it was started in 1925 or opened in 1925, and it just doesn't feel like it's changed months since. I know they had Tom Doak come in there and uh, restore some of that Rainer charm to the place, but it was just beautiful and fun and easy, not a very unstressful day of golf. Have you had the pleasure of playing there, Joe?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of playing Yeamans Hall several times. And oddly enough, once in a group behind Arnold Palmer. So I actually got to see a little bit of the King playing Yeamans, and that was a treat. So what a cool special place, Al, and a great choice. Um, it is. I love the word you use was the stress, the lack of stress, because the stress just melts away once you get up that entrance drive to the club. Minimal real estate. It was just tucked off way to the side, and those gorgeous live oaks, huge spreading limbs and drenched with Spanish moss. Its architect, Seth Rayner, described those live oaks as, quote, magnificent, giving a warmth to the course in the wintertime, which is very delightful. And with Seth Rayner, he didn't do a lot of courses, but invariably in the 1920s, he built them for very wealthy clients, which means he generally got great pieces of property to start with. So for the ease in walking through this and the just gorgeous, low key, low country setting, great choice for one of your favorite walks in the Links 100.
Only one I've done once and would love to do again. Where in the world top 100 do you go next?
Well, we're going south, way south to Australia, and might not be the only time we go to Australia during this podcast. But for me, a little bit of a controversial choice, not having anything to do with the course's greatness, just its terrain. The course I'm talking about is Kingston Heath in Melbourne area of Australia, the famous sand belt, very close by to Royal Melbourne. And what Kingston Heath does for me is it's a tiny piece of property, and it's mostly flat. I'd like to say flattish, because there's a little bit of movement here and there, but for an older gentleman, I'm not in marathoner shape. It is the perfect walk and an absolutely delightful walk because the bunkering might be the best in the world on any golf course. So, aside from that, I mean, I can throw out some quotes. Kingston Heath offers perhaps the best collection of par threes without water in the world, claims Greg Norman. It's short, yet it's visually demanding, visually impressive. Norman won an Australian Open there in 1995. Tiger won the Australian Masters there in 2009. Adam Scott took one in 2012. I mean, some big names winning tournaments at Kingston Heath. Uh, and I think one of the other things that really impressed me was a conversation I had with Gil Hanse a couple of years ago, and he said he said to me, "It's the best course ever that was built on modest or mediocre terrain." That was the question I asked him. And he said, everyone points to Kingston Heath as the perfect example of a great golf course on a fairly uninspiring piece of land. He said, the architect took what the site possessed, the sand, the scrub, the vegetation, and enhanced that property by features that sit down at ground level. Truly great work, unquote. And the reason why I said at the outset that it's a little bit of a controversial choice, even though it's ranked 14th in the world in the Links 100, is because there isn't a lot of variety in the terrain. those times where you kind of enjoy the climb for variety's sake, as long as it, doesn't destroy you. But the downhills and the uphills, it really is pretty flat. But the way the bunkers come out at odd angles and the steep lipped bunkers, greenside in fairways where you can't quite tell where there's grass. Where do I play this shot? Now, members eventually learned exactly where to play it, but for a first or second time visitor, boy, that's a big part of the challenge is just figuring out how much of that bunker to take on, where's the right spot to go. And then again, Mackenzie did the bunkering and some wonderful greens as well. So it's a really easy walk. If you can handle the humiliation of getting in and out of multiple bunkers, as I did, it's going to be one of the great rounds you'll ever have, and certainly one of the great walks.
It'll get its time in the sun too, Joe. More than the Lynx 100 when it hosts the 2028 President's Cup. It's also I remember seeing pictures of images recently of their short course that they added a few years ago, the Furrows, I believe it's called, and how exceptional that looked as an additional 9-hole stroll after your 18-hole walk there. You probably have it in your legs. If it was pretty flat for you all day, you have it in your legs for 9 more, I would think.
Absolutely.
That one is high on my list, high on the Lynx 100 list as well. And you alluded to it. We're going to stay in Australia, south central Australia, down to Seaton, right next to Adelaide, and Royal Adelaide at number 83 in the Lynx 100 is my second pick on this list as favorite walks. To be fair, this was not a course that I played, but I did walk it as a employee of the LPGA when the girls played the Women's Australian Open in 2017 at Royal Adelaide, won by Hana Jang of Korea. Her fourth career victory, first of that season, was at Royal Adelaide. Known to the members there as Seaton, and we stayed in the charming little town of Grange and commuted there every day, right on the water. So partially the walks around that little town were so enthralling and just captured my interest as some place that I can't imagine I ever would have gone to without that tournament being there. But I can't imagine ever forgetting either how wonderful that experience was. Adelaide Golf Club was given its royal title in 1923 by Governor Lee Windsor, therefore, after becoming Royal Adelaide Golf Club. It was my first experience looking at something Alistair McKenzie had his hands on as well. And that for me was another, I'd obviously, you watch the Masters every year, you see that. At that point in time, I had not been to the Masters, so I'd not seen Augusta National in person. So I was looking at these sharp-edged bunkers and this firm and fast course and thinking how amazing that looked to me and challenging. The winner of the 1920, the winner of the 1938 Australian Open, Jim Ferrier, his quote about Royal Adelaide or Seaton, there's always that pleasure at Seaton of pitting one's ability against the course as well as the surroundings, which have the real golfing atmosphere. It has the feel of a traditional links. It's also said on their site it's firm, fast, and open during the summer to challenging native rough grasses and non-prevailing winds in the spring. The golf course takes on many personalities over the course of the year, further increasing the enjoyment and challenge of the layout. So quite a pleasure for the people who get to play that regularly to not be looking and playing at a similar golf course year round. It sounds like it changes very much. But perhaps most well known about Royal Adelaide is the train line that bisects the course. And the passenger train that passes through every so often on the Grange line through the property. And that was one of the most fascinating things that I found about this course. It's not that there's a train that goes beside the course we've talked about in the past, Joe. This one goes right through it. It was actually preferred mode of transportation for members early in the years that used to come out to the links and play. Uh, it was a great, great time visiting there for the Women's Australian Open. I'd love to get back and actually play it, but it was fun to walk. And one of my favorite walks, in quotations, on the Lynx 100 for me.
Al, I love that choice. I really do. I've never been there. Um, and other than reading about it in various books, the first golfer of note that I remember talking to about this, and he was a huge fan, was Sir Nick Faldo. Uh, did multiple trips to Australia, raved about Royal Melbourne, but he mentioned Royal Adelaide specifically, and and how wonderful he thought it was. So, after that, kind of kept my eye on it, and I think it started to fade a little bit in various rankings over the years. Uh, because it was suffering from some conditioning issues, had gotten a little overgrown. And as I understand it, in the last few years, they have righted that ship. They have turned it around to where it is world class worthy again. Again, the novelty of having 12 holes on one side of the train tracks and six on the other. Only two holes still require a forced carry over the train tracks, fairly disconcerting in and of itself. But 2 pages of local rules cover situations concerning the holes regarding the busy Grange to Adelaide train line. And so there are a lot of situations that crop up with golf and trains, just like in the old days of Scotland. From a beauty standpoint, being a coastal course, and then also having the guy that really put it on the map, Alistair Mackenzie, when he redid it in 1926, he said at the time, one finds a most delightful combination of sand dunes and fir trees. I have never seen a seaside course possess such magnificent sand craters. So, with all of that going on, it's really, really great to see that folks are recognizing the renovations, the restorations, the attention to the conditioning, have put it kind of back on the world map, and it arrived nicely at our number 83 for the Lynx 100.
Tom Doak again and Brian Slawnick were among those involved in recent years in touching that place up. So kudos to them as well. All right, your next slot, Joe, in what could be golf's greatest walk of all.
All right, we're moving a little closer to home. It's still a pretty good flight from anybody in the United States. We're going to jolly old England and the suburbs of London, to be specific, for my favorite inland walk in the world, and that is the Old Course at Sunningdale. So I did a story, as you alluded to at the top of our show today, uh, and it was about the best walks a couple years ago for the print version of Links, and it was great fun to place Sunningdale among inland courses, the walk in the park, the best walk in the park. And I had plenty of support for that. So sad to say, I've only done this walk one time, but I had dreamed about it for a long time, was thrilled to get it done about 10 years ago. And, it started off as a fairly open heath, and Willie Park, and then H.S. Colt did some work 20 years afterwards, 1901 and then 1922 or 3. And Colt instilled a lot of the character in the old uh, birches, oaks, pine trees, very much a parkland flavor to the layout, which again has that, sandy subsoil that makes it so pleasant on the feet and the legs that the great heathland courses of London share. And you're thinking about these birches and oaks and pines, and you're thinking forest, but they're perfectly placed, not quite sure how to say that other than width. There's plenty of width, but the holes that tilt left to right and right to left and go gently up and gently down, they're spacious, but they're perfectly framed. So you have this feeling like you are walking in a park, but playing golf. And then the bunkering is so good that you get the strategic aspects necessary, for a great test of golf to be had. So, um, in that article that I did in Lynx print, it plays firm and fast enough to play like a Lynx. But our old friend Jim Finnegan, Pine Valley member, and wrote quite a bit about golf in England, Scotland, and Ireland. He said of Sunningdale, it's pure enchantment. Virtually every hole is played in splendid and beautiful isolation and in harmony with nature. The overall elevation change is about 75 feet. So you do get a little climbing and a little descending. I'm saying that. Back to Jim. 75 feet to Jim is close to ideal. No wonder it may be the single most beloved inland course in the British Isles. Clive Clark, we had on our podcast a couple of years ago, great player and architect, along with a great broadcaster. And he told us on this show, our podcast, you've got these very attractive tree-lined holes with heather planted just off the fairways. It's kind of a cross between Pine Valley and Pinehurst. You would never get tired of playing it. And, that is kind of what we're talking about. Darren Clark led off my piece when I did that, saying, the golf course is pristine. It's a wonderful, beautiful walk. I can't sing its praises high enough. So there you go. My endorsement and a few other celebrity endorsers. Sunningdale Old, just absolutely fabulous place to have your golf clubs and go take a walk.
Brilliant. Yeah. And the last line in your piece from Bobby Jones, I wish I could take this golf course home with me. I loved that one as well. Uh, yeah, I don't think we got many arguments to your choice there either, Joe. Uh, Once your print piece went out, it was pretty much like, yeah, I could see that. Everyone was sort of in agreement with you and didn't feel too strongly that something else got knocked off the throne for golf's greatest walk. So pretty much a unanimous winner for us there.
How about you, Al? What else is on your list of favorite walks to the Links 100?
Well, I like how in that piece you mentioned it earlier. You said striding seaside is a singular pleasure, but a tranquil walk in the woods can be equally compelling. Well, how about both? Right? And the one place that you can absolutely get that as a public golfer in the US with three entries on our Links 100, but I'm going to mention these two specifically at Bandon Dunes Golf Resort, Bandon Trails at number 97, and Bandon Dunes number 99. The third is Pacific Dunes, the highest ranked of the three at number 42. And that is a great golf course and a great walk, but I've just felt brutally challenged by Pacific Dunes every time I played it. So it wasn't a walk that was particularly pleasant, I would say. More brutish and challenging and really good golf course, but kind of beats you to a pulp. Whereas playing trails, weaving through that enchanted sort of forest type of area, and Bandon Dunes hugging the coastline, going back and forth from the water, just kind of teasing you with it the whole time before you get to that iconic 16th hole, uh, almost drivable par four if you hit it in the right spot, and then ducking back towards the clubhouse. I've said it before that the Bandon Dunes, the original course, is my favorite there at the resort. I think it's just lovely. I think it's challenging without being knocking you over the head, sort of like I feel like Pacific Dunes does, at least to me. Uh, and Trails, I've only gotten the chance to play once. Like we went there the first time and I played it, and I sort of, it was the first course we played at Bandon, and I was sort of, left thinking like, this is a good golf course, but like I came to Bandon Dunes, I want to see the ocean and the cliffs and all of that, and I really really want to get back because my perception of Bandon Trails has changed over time. Just thinking about how cool of a golf course it was and um, how much I enjoyed walking it. So, just unfortunately, I was there and I was like, Bandon Dunes, I'm gonna play on the Oregon coast, and you're like duck into the woods and never see the ocean again. But at Bandon Dunes, it's a place where you kind of just feel grateful to be alive and to have made it to this destination golf resort, uh, walking only golf resort, and being able to walk any of those fairways is a pure pleasure. Those two happen to be fantastic walks on this list.
Okay, Al. Again, sometimes it's fun when we disagree. However, in this case, I'm in agreement with you again. Now, that doesn't mean I can't poke holes in your choice. For starters, you're not really on that sandy subsoil at Bandon Dunes. There is sand everywhere, but you're kind of walking on the rocky cliff tops too, and not quite as cushiony on the feet and the legs. But for exhilaration, yeah, 100%. A plus. That's the grade I give Bandon Dunes and the walk. I do understand what you're saying about Pacific Dunes. That's my favorite course at Bandon Dunes. But if you're spraying the ball when the wind is howling and you've got to climb up and down those dunes and dune bunkers, it can get pretty exhausting. A middle handicapper like me, yeah, I can see that. And the walk isn't as much fun. You're so exposed out there. Bandon Dunes, you're equally exposed, but you don't have as many of those giant dune situations to have to tromp up and down to retrieve your ball. Bandon Trails is another one. I've loved it since day one, reminding me of some courses that I'm very fond of. But as a walk, inevitably we would do Bandon Trails second in the day. And there's two uphill climbs at 16 and 18. And if you're not a health buff, you really feel it in your calves and your legs and your feet as you're trying to make your way up 16 and 18 at Bandon Trails. But since day one of the most underrated golf courses for me out there. So again, understand why Pacific factors in the way it does for you in the walking aspect and why you might pick Bandon Dunes and Bandon Trails for your Bandon co-picks.
You're right about that. I forgot about that 18th hole at Bandon Trails being a, particularly steep climb to that green. By the end of it, you're just like, oh, like race you to the finish
Yes,
line.
yes, but you're younger and healthier than I am, and so you don't go through the same anguish as I do in finishing around waving the white towel.
I will say this too: if Sheep Ranch was on the Lynx 100, I would have probably put it above all of them. I have loved
Yeah.
that course from the minute it opened too, and that may not be like a popular opinion, but it's right there with Bandon Dunes, the original course, as my one and two favorites, and sort of I flip them back and forth in my head every now and then. But um, Cheap Ranch is not on here, so it's not on my list. But it is. It is on my list. All right, last one for you, and let's take this thing home.
Okay, Al. One more course for me to pick, and there's some experts out there, including the Lynx editor George Pepper, who would say, "Where is Fisher's Island on your list, Al and Joe?" Because along with Cypress Point, it's kind of acknowledged as maybe the greatest walk, the most beautiful scenery from start to finish, the most interesting architecture Seth Rayner put together. And again, uh, wow, it should be on my list. I've only been there once and truly enjoyed it alongside photographer Larry Lambrecht. And what is not to love about Fisher's Island? For some reason, I went with France's version of Sunningdale for my last pick, which is Morfontaine. And again, listeners who have been to a lot of these courses might say, well, isn't that really similar to Sunningdale? And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. If it's possible, it's just more low key. Um, very few people get to play for visitor play at Morfontaine. It's really quiet. It'll be about 40 minutes outside of Paris. And you think about all of the fun craziness of Paris and the sightseeing and the shopping and the cultural stuff. And then you take this car ride to a very difficult place to find, and you are transported into another world of forest and tranquility. And just, again, you feel so lucky to be aboard this golf course. Uh, Again, pretty gentle movement on the championship course along the lines of Sunningdale. This golf course, Morfontaine, was designed by Tom Simpson, one of the best on the continent. And, it's not a long golf course. It starts off with three tough holes, 475, 485, 225, and then eases off somewhat. But wow, this was a favorite of General Eisenhower, and then he became president during World War II. Um, and I wrote a couple of years ago that its Heathland appearance and personality ranks with London's finest, such as Sunningdale and Swinley Forest. And if the back nine doesn't quite measure up to the front, you're beyond caring. You're so charmed by the sandy soil, gently undulating terrain, gorgeous pines, and splendid solitude that all you can think about is how happy you are to be aboard. So Kyle Phillips has done some touch-ups over the last 15, 20 years, lengthened the par 5 12 hole, but otherwise it mostly looks and plays like it did 100 years ago, almost 100. And if you're lucky enough to find yourself near Paris and wanting to play golf and have some connections, why not? Go for Morfontaine. And there's a 9-hole course on property that was built before then that in some ways is superior to the championship course. Definitely the green complexes, also done by Tom Simpson. So, yeah, Al, I mean, for one or the other, I'd like to go back to Fisher's, but for some reason, that round at Morfontaine just never has left me and positive memories.
Yeah, you'd be so fortunate to get to either of those places, as it sounds like. And Morfontaine, as you were talking about, I was thinking like it kind of sounds like Pine Valley in France. And I looked up. George did a piece a while back about golf's most resonating courses, where he kind of threw courses into different category. There's one about enclaves that includes a century or so of intimidating exclusivity combined with a formidable golf course is the recipe for these. And there it is, Morfontaine listed along with our number one, Cypress Point and Pine Valley, and National Golf Links up there in our top 5 as well. Seminole is another one that's on our list. So safe to say, if you find yourself there, it's probably going to be a good walk because of how fortunate you feel to be a part of it. But this is generally considered the best in France, right? Maybe even the best in continental Europe, for that matter. Kyle Phillips, who we know is building that course at Apogee. We know him from King's Barnes and Yas Links and other well-known designs. He was involved in some renovation work there as well. So, yeah, am I right about that, Joe? Is that you think that's the best maybe course? It's certainly in France, but maybe in Europe itself.
Yeah, I think so. I remember sitting at a dinner table over a glass of wine with Paul McGinley, and Jean Van de Velde. And we were having the debate between Le Golf National, the Ryder Cup site in Paris or outside of Paris, and Morfontaine. And that's the dilemma in modern design with the golf pros, is that Le Golf National didn't have much charm, but it had that fantastic finish with water framing three of the final four holes and is a really stiff test for today's breed of professionals. So at the end of the day, I should say the end of the night in my conversation with Paul McGinley and Jean Van de Velde, we came to the conclusion that Morfontaine was just that much more enjoyable, that much more fun to play, even as Le Golf National was that much more testing. And I think for the folks who follow Links magazine, Morfontaine is going to get the nod every time over Le Golf National.
Interesting because we don't have Le Golf National on our architects list. You got to go down to 98 Royal Hague in the Netherlands before you get another continental Europe course on there. So,
And I think
yeah,
possibly a surprise that it didn't make the top 100, given its tournament pedigree, is Valderrama.
yeah,
But in Spain, which is long considered the top tournament course in continental Europe. So again, tastes do change a little bit. And perhaps the next time we do the Links 100, we'll see some movement with some of these other courses.
very well. And speaking of movement, these are all great places to stretch your legs. Hope you agree. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have other picks that are part of this list. Would love to hear from anyone who's listening to this episode what their favorite walks were on the Links 100 and, just in general, if you want. What are your favorite walks in golf? For Joe Passoff, I'm Al Lunsford. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Links Golf Podcast, and we will see you next time.